leaders this morning. But now I'm visiting Northern TAFE, and here we are again repledging to the workforce of the future, the young apprentices and the TAFE teachers, that Labor stands for public TAFE and more apprenticeships. In particular today, Mark McGowan and I are announcing that if Labor forms a government after Saturday's election, we're going to invest an additional $12 million to encourage more young women to go into the traditional trades. It's part of Labor's vision for an equal society between men and women. Specifically, what this money will be used to do is to be provided to group training associations who can go out and encourage young women who'd like to have a crack at the traditional trades. And then what the group training organisations will do is find them employers who are happy to have diverse workplaces, and it'll also provide ongoing mentoring. People mightn't realise in some of the traditional trades, only 2 or 3% of the apprentices are young women. And Labor wants to change that. And that is just the latest in a long line of propositions of Australia's policy to make Australia a tradie nation again. I might just make the observation as I've been travelling around. A lot of young people are deciding and working out what is this election all about. And talking to the young apprentices today, it's very clear that for many young Australians, one of the defining issues of this election is to take real action on climate change. But in fact, it's not just young people who want to see real action on climate change. The desire for real action on climate change goes right across the generations in Australia. People know it is essential and urgent. People know that Labor, not the Liberals, will take real action on climate change. I'd now like to invite Mark McGowan to say some words, and then we can have a discussion on the issues as we close to the election.
Thanks very much, Bill, and welcome back to Western Australia once again. Can I welcome the announcement about apprenticeships and training. As you might be aware, we've frozen TAFE fees. We put in place a scheme by removing some of the payroll tax rorts to support funding for apprenticeships across Western Australia. And can I also welcome Bill's and Federal Labor's interest in climate change. The country is screaming out for a national approach on that issue. States going it alone, states doing their own thing is causing some trouble for industry. We need a national approach on climate change, and I'm pleased Federal Labor has that policy, and that's what Western Australia desperately needs. Can I also just acknowledge Bill Shorten and thank him for his huge interest in Western Australia over the course of the last 6 years that he has been the opposition leader. Bill has succeeded in putting Western Australia on the map like no other politician in the last 13 years. And I'd like to thank him for his interest, his visits, his taking forward of issues like the GST and Metronet and other funding issues for Western Australia. It's been a breath of fresh air. We know that the federal Liberal Party took Western Australia for granted. Now Western Australia is in play. It's all because of Bill Shorten's efforts. Thanks very much.
Mr Shorten, the government keeps saying that rent's going to go up by 20% under Labor's negative gearing policy. Is that true?
Listen, I've got Chris Bowen here, so I know he's itching to deal with this latest bit of government rubbish. But I would file this in the same bin that you put the confiscation of utes in 2030, the death taxes. You know, this is a government who's been telling lies through the election, but in the last week all they've got is lies, and this is another lie. But I've got Chris Bowen here, Shadow Treasurer, and why don't we hear what he thinks about this latest campaign from the government.
Happy to deal with that, Phoebe, but could I just deal with two very brief issues before I get to your question? Firstly, of course, wages growth out today, very disappointing figures yet again. This government says they want higher wages growth. They just oppose every plan that we come up with to get wages growth going. And of course, most concerning for the people of Western Australia is the lowest wages growth in the country is here, in Western Australia, at 1.6%. And why doesn't the government get it? Because they've got members like Kevin Hogan in Page who says that cutting penalty rates is great news for young people. I mean, how out of touch is this government? You've got the Deputy Prime Minister who says one of the biggest problems facing the nation is we've got too many young voters, and we've got a member saying cutting young people's wages, not just young people work on Sundays, but lots of young people do, is great news for them, when we know that there's been no increase in employment under the penalty rates cut. And just very briefly on one other issue, the Treasurer has this morning confirmed he'll be releasing his costings tomorrow. Tomorrow. I mean, pathetic. Almost a week after the Labor Party. the earliest any opposition has released their costings ever, costings which led Paul Kelly, for example, not always, praiseworthy of the Labor Party, to say these figures show Labor is ready for government, and you've got Josh Frydenberg releasing his figures 36 hours before people vote. Last time they did that was 2013, and of course the real cuts came in the 2014 budget. I mean, absolutely pathetic on their behalf. Now, to deal with the latest lies from Scott Morrison, I mean, these guys just make it up when it comes to negative gearing. It's all they've got. They've claimed that house prices will crash. They've claimed that house prices will rise. They've claimed that rents will soar. They just make it up. And the big problem for the Prime Minister is that report that he refers to shows rents going up under his government as well. Shows rents going up under a Liberal government with no policy change. Just like climate change, where he picks the figures to suit him, he does it on negative gearing. As we draw to the final stage of this election campaign, he's Bill and Labor outlining a vision for government, and they finish as they started, with lies and fear.
Mr. Shorten, you've got hundreds of billions.
So you and then you.
Mr. Shorten, you've got hundreds of billions of dollars of spending commitments to Australians at this election, and obviously that's reliant on getting your, tax reforms through the Senate. If the Senate won't pass your savings measures, are you committed to all your spending promises, and how will you pay for it?
Just wanted to say for people in the West Australian media, this is our booklet of policies for Western Australia. So, before I get to the heart of the answer, this is the only set of policies for Western Australia. The Liberals haven't bothered printing one. They haven't got a set of policies. So I say to West Australians watching the news tonight, only one party respects you enough to come up with a set of fully funded policies. Now, in terms of the Senate, the best way to avoid having a crazy right-wing nest of extremists in the Senate is don't vote for them. Vote Labor in the Reps and vote Labor in the Senate. I'm not like Mr Morrison. He has formed a deal with Mr Palmer. He is relying, no doubt, on the votes of One Nation to elect some of his team across the line in other states of Australia. So, first of all, I'm optimistic that Labor will get more votes than your question implies. Secondly, if we form a government, we will have a mandate. Now, this word mandate gets used a lot in politics, doesn't it? But I think it's a lot more meaningful when an opposition presents its policies to the people of Australia. And then we can argue to the Senate, whatever gets elected, that this is what we took to the people. So if this right-wing Senate, if it falls as you imagine, or as your question assumes, which I don't, we'll fight them on reversing the penalty rates cuts. We will fight them on providing the funding so that 2.6 million pensioners get some care for their teeth. We will fight the Senate when it comes to making sure that nearly 1 million Australian households get a subsidy of $2,000 per child per year in childcare. We're up for the fight. If the Senate don't want to fix the waiting lists in Tasmania on health, if they don't want to see young apprentices in Western Australia get some support, if they don't want to see us build Cross River Rail in Queensland, if they don't want to see us do the South Road in Adelaide, we will fight them. But the point about it is, in this election, what Australians are telling me wherever they go is, for goodness sakes, Bill, end the chaos. End the chaos. They want real action on climate change. They want to end the chaos. The best way to end the chaos is vote Labor in the House of Representatives and vote Labor in the Senate. John was next, sorry, and then I'll come to you.
Mr. Shaw, we've got a situation at the moment where the Pentagon is planning on sending 100,000 troops to Iran in case of an incident there. In recent days, there has been growing concern over the relationship between China and the United States over trade disputes. How would you, as Prime Minister, handle those delicate relationships, and why do you think you would be best placed to handle those relationships?
Well, one of the reasons why I'm best placed is the person standing next to me in this press conference. She's called Penny Wong. But what I will do before I pass to Penny is just go to a couple of the issues. On Australia, America and China, what I won't do is call China our customers. I won't adopt a simplistic approach, an approach which only views our relations in North Asia and other Asian societies as what can they do for us. I have said previously at press conferences that America and our security umbrella with America is bedrock for Labor. It's bedrock business. But we want to have foreign policy with an Australian accent. So we will be reaching out to different Asian countries, including and especially China, to make sure that they understand where we're coming from as a nation, and that, of course, we don't surprise them and they don't surprise us. I might get Penny here. She's been thinking about these questions for a significant period of time.
Thanks. Look, the only thing I wanted to add is actually on the trade dispute. Obviously, that is, we have a view as a trading nation, as a substantial power that has an interest in open, fair trading arrangements. We do have a view that the multilateral system is important. And we consistently have said nobody wins from a trade war. Nobody wins from a trade war. I would say on this issue, that is one issue in which there has been bipartisanship, and the coalition has reflected that. And we have a different approach to the issue of multilateral trade. I would say we would encourage both China and the United States to come to a resolution because not even the great economies of the world win from a trade conflict.
Listen, I should also just say that it'll be my intention if we form a government that at the earliest possible stage I'll be sending our new foreign minister to visit a series of Asian capitals to let them know that there's a new government and that we intend to be active participants in our relationship throughout Asia.
Mr. Shorten, on your wage theft announcement this morning,
Why don't you have the question?
Will casual workers be able to pursue claims of unpaid annual leave here? And if they are, what's your message to small business owners who may have already paid casual loadings and might now face a backlog of claims?
Well, let's not scare people. First of all, what we're going to do is have a small claims tribunal, which actually, to be honest, the Business Council of Australia's back. They don't always back everything we say, but, you know, that's good that they support it. So that should allay some people's concerns. All you'll be able to do in a small claims tribunal is pursue matters that you are legally entitled to. So if the casual worker wasn't legally entitled to a right because they were a casual, well, they're not going to be able to pursue a breach of contract, are they? So let's not have any fear. But what there is, the problem that we're solving is that for a lot of our fellow Australians, they're getting ripped off. We know that when we'd buy the coffee in the takeaway shop, some of the big brands and some of the big chains, we didn't realise those people were getting systematically ripped off. That's not good enough, is it? You can't have a business model in this country which means ripping off people by systemic wages theft. What we want to do is have a one-stop shop. Let's get these matters sorted, because clearly there has been an inability, despite how hard the Fair Work Ombudsman works, to get to the bottom of every matter. So what Labor's doing is actually we're resolving disputes before they become big disputes. Rather than getting into the courts, speedy remediation, in my experience, often, you know, stops small conflicts becoming big conflicts. And I welcome both the ACTU and the BCA saying this looks like the right way to go. Sorry, you're next, and then you are next. Sorry, I was being naughty.
Mr. Shorten, on the issue of wages, we know that Labor is unhappy with the wage figures, the wage growth figures that we've seen today for this quarter. You continually say that wages will be better off under a Labor government.
That's true.
So you're not putting a figure on it. You're not telling voters how much better off they would be. Can you give them any indication how much? Well,
it depends on
and how can they take you seriously if you're not prepared to put that sort of even any benchmark?
Well, let's go to that last bit of, bit of cheekiness in the question. Let's deal with that first. Take us seriously. We're the only game in town on a wages policy. You could send out search parties from here to Christmas. You're not going to find the Liberals' wages policy, except, of course, Matthias Cormann, son of Western Australia, who did say low wages is a design feature of their economy. So we are the only game in town when it comes to having a wages policy. And as for specific numbers, you're a student of the industrial relations system. You know that if there's to be a minimum wage, living wage, that'll ultimately be decided by the independent umpire. That'll be after evidence is given from workers, from unions, from business, from companies. But what I can say, if you want some specific numbers, is we're going to reverse the penalty rate cuts. Did you know that as a result of these penalty rate cuts, people have lost up to $77 a week? They'll get that back. Did you know in major retail chains, it's been tens of millions of dollars which companies haven't had to pay workers in penalty rates? So there are some specific numbers there. Did you know in wages theft by our small claims tribunal, that's tens of millions of dollars of money going back to the workers? I'll give you another number. Clive Palmer owes his workers $67 million. The Commonwealth taxpayers had to pay for that. I mean, if we're going to talk about wages, there are significant issues, and we've got the numbers to answer it. But let's go to that general sort of assumption behind it, and I'll finish up on this point on wages. The government seems to think that what's happening now is good enough. It's simply not. This is why we want to have modest but meaningful improvements. The government seems to think that it's good enough now that Australian families have to dip into household savings just to maintain their standard of living. We need vision in this country. Australians are very proud of this country. When you get off the plane from Tullamarine or Mascot or Perth, you always know you're back home in a great country. But the Australian dream is not quite what it once was. It's under a bit of pressure and decay. Families should be moving forward ahead every year. We shouldn't have working women in Australia going to work to pay the childcare so they can go to work. So these are some of the propositions around wages and fairness and cost of living which make us the best reason to vote on Saturday.
Sure, you said that you'll bring together, if you're elected, you'll bring together business groups, employee groups and unions for a meeting here in Perth to talk workplace relations.
Yeah.
We know that the ACTU's Change the Rules campaign is vastly different to what business groups want. So what can you realistically achieve? What do you want to achieve with such a meeting?
Well, it's all that's wrong with Australia at the moment is that you've got people in different rooms yelling at each other. And that's what people hate when they see on the nightly news, when they watch your very well-informed broadcasts. They say, oh, there's Labor saying one thing, Liberals saying another, the employers are in another room, the unions are somewhere else. Do you know what a lot of people think about the leadership of this nation? Can't you people just work it out? Don't come to us with all your problems, come to us with your answers. This is the sort of Prime Minister I'll be. I will bring business into the same room as unions. I'll bring the small businesses too, because not all small businesses love big businesses. I'd like to hear from the farmers, because they're getting done over by some of the processors and some of the big supermarket chains. I understand this country works best when we're all in the same room. We need to get productivity going. I'll have my key economic spokesperson there, Chris Bowen, talk about the measures we can do to enhance productivity. I'll have state governments there. Because if we can improve the productivity of the nation, how long it takes people to get from A to B, how long the trucks takes, the trains take, that all means the nation's working together. I don't expect everyone to agree with everyone else. We don't. We don't all even agree with each other in a press conference. But the point about it is we do better when we work things out together. I saw John Howard had a swipe at me. Fair enough. He's, the last Liberal Prime Minister standing just about on their team turning up. But the point about it is he said something about me and Bob Hawke. I actually think Bob Hawke and Keating were right when they brought people together. This country, unstoppable when we're all going in the same direction, but if we're fracturing, that's the wrong way to go.
Well, what is
Common ground, though. So
what is the common ground?
what is common ground on this?
Do you know, I tell you, a common ground in this country? We want our kids to get the best quality education. We want our pensioner grandparents to be able to get dental care when they need it. Common ground is we don't think that black 18-year-old men should be going to jail more likely than going to university. Common ground is we'd like to see us all a bit more civil to each other. Common ground is we want people to be safe in their community. Common ground is that we don't want people waiting 24 hours to be admitted to emergency. Common ground is we'd like to see these apprenticeships get a job. Common ground is that we want to make sure that people have got, good pay. Common ground is that a small business with a good idea doesn't get strangled by a large company not paying them on time. Common ground is that we want to make sure we have quality NBN. Common ground in this country is that we take real action on climate change. And I suspect, but we'll find out on Saturday, there's a lot more common ground for change to end the chaos. Very last question, Brett. Sorry, very last question.
Today you've received an endorsement from Bob Hawke. He said his biggest regret as Prime Minister was not delivering a treaty for the Indigenous Australians. Is this unfinished business for Labor? And will you be the Prime Minister that finally closes the gap?
Listen, for a lot of people, the plight of our first Australians doesn't worry them, but for a lot of other people, it does. I'm one of the latter. We have people who share our country with us who've got 60,000 years continuous connection. The last 250 years hasn't been that great for them, let's be honest. Having said that, I do think we can close the gap. I'm not going to be so arrogant to say as that I will close the gap or I will achieve a particular outcome, but I do think our first Australians should be referred to in our Constitution. For example, if we were writing the Constitution today, which of course we can't, but if we were, we'd talk about our first Australians, wouldn't we? So I think that it is an important issue. We want to have truth-telling. I'm open to a voice. I'm open to a process which would see proper reconciliation in this country. We've tried everything else with our first Australians. We've tried telling them what to do. We've tried taking their kids away from them. We've tried chucking them into jail. We've tried interventions. We've tried paternalism. I've got a new plan. I'm going to try partnership. Thanks. I did say last question. I did say last question.